The smell of burning paper jolted me awake that Sunday afternoon. I dozed off on the couch after my weekly chemotherapy session, my body still adjusting to the new treatment protocol. Through my hazy vision, I saw Patricia, my mother-in-law, standing in our backyard, watching something burn in our metal fire pit. My legs were weak, but instinct propelled me forward. As I stumbled toward the sliding glass door, my heart stopped when I spotted the familiar leather cover of my journal among the flames. The burgundy binding, a gift from my husband, Mark, on my first day of treatment, curled and blackened before my eyes. "What are you doing?" My voice came out as a whisper, my throat still raw from the morning's nausea. Patricia turned, her face set in that familiar look of righteous determination. "I'm doing what's best for this family, Sarah. All this cancer talk, all these depressing writings, it's bringing everyone down. Mark can barely focus at work, and the kids, they need their mother back, not the shadow of a person." The journal had been my sanctuary for 2 years. Every appointment, every test result, every small victory, and every devastating setback was documented in those pages. But more than that, it held my deepest fears, my hopes, my letters to my children in case I didn't make it. The thought of those words turning to ash made me physically ill. Those were my private thoughts, I managed, ripping the doorframe for support. "You had no right." "I have every right," Patricia snapped. "This is my son's family you're destroying with your constant drama. Always posting those hospital updates online. Always talking about your journey. Some things should be kept private, Sarah. Cancer isn't something to parade around." I wanted to scream, to push her away from the fire pit, to salvage whatever pages might remain. But my body, weakened from Thursday's treatment, wouldn't cooperate. Instead, I slid down the doorframe, tears streaming down my face. Mark found me there an hour later when he returned from taking our kids, Emma and Jack, to their swimming lessons. Patricia had left without another word, probably to attend her weekly church service where she'd pray for my soul, or whatever she claimed to do these days. "Sarah? Honey, what's wrong?" Mark knelt beside me, his face etched with concern. He'd been my rock through everything, the diagnosis, the double mastectomy, the endless rounds of chemotherapy. Looking at him now, I couldn't hold back anymore. Through sobs, I told him what his mother had done. His face darkened with each word, his hands clenching into fists. "She what?" He stood up abruptly, pulling out his phone. "This ends now." But I grabbed his wrist. "Wait." Despite my anger, despite my grief, an idea was forming. 3 days ago, I'd received an email I hadn't told anyone about yet. The National Cancer Support Network had reached out after seeing my social media posts about my recovery journey. They wanted me to be the face of their new campaign, sharing my story to inspire other survivors. Patricia had always been threatened by my openness about cancer. She believed in suffering quietly, in keeping up appearances. When I started my Instagram account documenting my journey, she called it tasteless. When I organized a fundraiser for our local cancer center, she refused to attend, claiming I was exploiting my illness for attention. "What is it?" Mark asked, noticing the change in my expression. I pulled out my phone, hands shaking slightly as I opened my email. "Read this." As Mark read the email, his eyes widened. The campaign would include nationwide billboards, TV interviews, and a documentary series following cancer survivors. They'd chosen me because of the journal entries I'd occasionally shared online, the raw, honest reflections that had apparently touched thousands of followers. "Sarah, this is amazing," Mark exclaimed. Then his expression turned thoughtful. "Mom's going to lose it when she sees your face on billboards across the city." "That's not why I want to do it," I said quietly, though a small part of me couldn't deny the satisfaction. Those journal entries she burned, they might be gone, but their impact isn't. Every story I shared helped someone else feel less alone. If I can reach more people, give more hope. Mark helped me to my feet, pulling me into a gentle embrace, mindful of my port. "You're incredible, you know that. And you're right, this is bigger than Mom's small-mindedness." That evening, as I sat at my desk composing my acceptance email to the network, my phone buzzed with a message from Patricia. "I pray you'll understand I did this out of love. Some things are better left in the past. It's time to move on." I looked at the empty space on my bookshelf where my journal used to sit, then at the network's email on my screen. With steady fingers, I typed my response. Moving on doesn't mean hiding our scars, Patricia. Sometimes it means using them to light the way for others. I hit send on both messages, the one to my mother-in-law and my acceptance to the network. Within minutes, my phone lit up with a response from the network's director. "Welcome aboard, Sarah. Your story is going to change lives." Looking out at the now cold fire pit in our backyard, I touched my bare scalp, where my hair had once again started to thin from the latest round of treatments. Patricia thought she was erasing my story, but she'd only written its next chapter. Tomorrow, I would start a new journal, but this time, my words wouldn't be hidden between leather covers. They would be shared with every survivor who needed to hear them. And somewhere in the city, Patricia would soon see that some stories refuse to be silenced, no matter how hard you try to burn them away. 3 months after Patricia burned my journal, I stood in front of a camera crew in our living room. The same living room where I'd spent countless days recovering from chemo, where my kids had carefully helped me adjust my headscarf, and where Patricia had once told me I was choosing to wallow in my illness. "Just speak from your heart," the documentary director, Lisa, encouraged as the makeup artist made final touches to my face. My hair had started growing back in soft patches, and instead of covering it, I decided to let it show. Every stage of recovery deserved to be seen. "Mrs. Henderson is here," Emma announced from the doorway, her voice tight. At 12, my daughter had developed a protective streak since witnessing her grandmother's behavior. She'd been the one to discover some partially burned pages in the garden the day after the incident. Patricia walked in, her usual perfectly coordinated outfit and immaculate makeup in place. Mark had insisted she come today, not for reconciliation, but to witness what her actions had sparked. "Sarah," she nodded stiffly, then froze as she took in the cameras, lights, and the large poster board propped against the wall showing the campaign's first billboard design. It featured my face, bare scalp, and all with the text, "Every scar tells a story. Every story matters." "What is all this?" Patricia's voice wavered. Before anyone could respond, Lisa called, rolling in 3, 2. I looked directly into the camera, feeling stronger than I had in months. My cancer story began 2 years ago, but it's not just about medical procedures and treatment protocols. It's about finding your voice when others try to silence you. It's about turning pain into purpose. For the next hour, I shared everything: the diagnosis, the treatments, the support from my family, and yes, the burning of my journal. Patricia shifted uncomfortably in her seat as I described how that act of destruction had led to this moment. "Sometimes," I said, "those who claim to protect us with their silence actually harm us the most. Cancer isn't something to be ashamed of. It's not something to hide. Every survivor's story deserves to be heard." During a break in filming, Patricia approached me, her hands clutching her designer handbag. "You're making me look like a monster," she whispered harshly. "No, Patricia. You did that yourself," I said, keeping my voice level. "But this isn't about you. It's about every person fighting this battle who's been told to stay quiet, to not make others uncomfortable." The doorbell rang, and Emma rushed to answer it. Voices filled the hallway, and suddenly our living room was crowded with familiar faces, members of my support group, the ones who had read my shared journal entries online and found comfort in them. "We're here for the group segment," Maria, my chemo buddy, announced. She stopped short when she saw Patricia. "Oh, hello, Mrs. Wilson." Patricia looked around the room, taking in the faces, some with hair, some without, some bearing surgical scars proudly visible. These were the people she dismissed as my cancer friends, the ones she'd said were keeping me from moving on. "These people," I said softly, "they're why I wrote that journal. We heal better when we heal together." Lisa gathered everyone for the group shot, positioning us on and around the couch. Patricia stood awkwardly by the door, watching as person after person shared how my openness about my journey had impacted them. "Sarah's posts about her bad days helped me feel less alone," Maria shared. Her journal entry about telling her kids, "I must have read it 20 times before I told my own," another woman added. The way she described her fear but chose hope anyway. "It gave me courage during my darkest days," a young man contributed. As the stories continued, I noticed Patricia's expression shifting. The rigid judgment in her face began to crack, revealing something that looked almost like shame. During the next break, she slipped out without a word. But she left something on the side table, a partially burned page from my journal that she must have kept. The edges were charred, but the words were still legible. Dear Emma and Jack, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it, but know that every moment fighting to stay with you was worth it. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let others see our struggle. Let them learn from our journey. I carefully folded the page and tucked it into my new journal, a bright blue one filled with 3 months of fresh entries, campaign plans, and messages from survivors worldwide. The rest of the filming day passed in a blur of tears, laughter, and raw honesty. As the crew packed up, Lisa showed me the rough cut of the opening sequence. Seeing myself on screen, speaking directly to others fighting their own battles, I knew we were creating something powerful. That evening, after everyone had left, Mark found me in the backyard, standing by the fire pit where my original journal had burned. "You okay?" he asked, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "Better than okay," I replied. "You know what I realized today?" Patricia thought she was ending my story, but she just helped me tell it louder. My phone buzzed. Another message from the network. The first billboard would go up tomorrow, right along Patricia's route to church. Sometimes I thought, the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting better, growing stronger, and helping others do the same. And somewhere in this city, a woman who tried to burn my story would soon see it shining from every corner, refusing to be extinguished. 6 months after the documentary aired, I stood at a podium in front of 500 people at the National Cancer Survivors Conference. My story had reached millions, spawning support groups across the country and a movement encouraging survivors to share their journeys openly. The billboard campaign had expanded to 30 cities. My inbox was flooded with messages from survivors and their families, stories of how loved ones had tried to silence them. But more importantly, they shared how they had found their voices. As I adjusted the microphone, I spotted Patricia in the back row. She hadn't asked to come, Mark had insisted. She sat rigidly, hands folded in her lap, looking smaller somehow than the commanding presence she'd once been. When my mother-in-law burned my journal, I began she thought she was erasing my story. Instead, she gave it wings. The audience, a sea of faces bearing various stages of treatment and recovery, listened intently as I continued. But today, I want to talk about forgiveness, not because it was asked for, but because holding on to anger takes energy we survivors need for healing. From my folder, I pulled out the charred page Patricia had returned months ago. This survived the fire, just like us. Sometimes, the very things meant to destroy us become our strength. After my speech, during the mingling session, Patricia approached my booth, where I was signing copies of my newly published book, a compilation of survivor stories, starting with my own. "Sarah," she said, her voice lacking its usual authority, "I've been attending therapy." I looked up, surprised not by the words, but by the humility in her tone. "The therapist helped me understand why I couldn't handle your openness about cancer." She pulled out a tissue, dabbing at her eyes carefully to preserve her makeup. "My sister, the one I told you died in a car accident? She had breast cancer. But back then, in our community, we didn't discuss such things. She died alone. Silent. Ashamed." The revelation hit me like a physical force. In all our years of conflict, Patricia had never mentioned this. "When you started sharing your journey so publicly," she continued, "it brought back everything I regretted about her last days. How we pretended everything was fine until it wasn't. How we never really said goodbye." I reached across the table and took her hand, the first time we touched since before the journal incident. "Would you like to share her story in the next book?" I asked softly. Help her voice be heard, even now. Patricia's eyes welled with tears. "You'd do that? After what I did?" "That's what this movement is about," I replied, breaking the silence no matter how long it's been. Just then, Emma and Jack rushed over, excited about the youth support group they'd been attending, a program born from my campaign for families affected by cancer. "Grandma, did you see Mom on the big screen?" Jack asked, referring to the conference's opening video. "I did," Patricia answered, then hesitated before adding, "Your mother is very brave." Emma, still protective, studied her grandmother. "Are you sorry for burning Mom's journal?" The conference hall fell quiet around us as Patricia knelt to her granddaughter's level. "More sorry than I can say. But sometimes our biggest mistakes lead to beautiful things. Look around, all these people are here because your mom refused to be silenced." Later that evening at the closing ceremony, I received the Survivor's Voice Award. As I accepted it, I asked Patricia to join me on stage. "This is for every person who was told their story was too uncomfortable, too private, too much," I announced. "And it's for those who tried to silence them, who can learn and grow and become part of the healing." Patricia squeezed my hand, and I saw in her eyes what I'd never seen before: understanding. The next day, a new billboard went up in our city. But this time, it wasn't just my face. It showed hundreds of survivors, their loved ones, and yes, even Patricia, all holding journals. The caption read, "Every story deserves to be told, even yours." My original journal may have turned to ashes in that fire pit, but from those ashes, thousands of new stories emerged. And in the end, that was the greatest revenge, not against Patricia, but against the silence that had kept too many survivors in the shadows for too long. As I wrote in my new journal that night, sometimes the people who try to write our endings actually write our beginnings. And sometimes, the very person who tried to silence your story becomes part of its most powerful chapter. Patricia and I would never have the perfect mother-in-law/daughter-in-law relationship, but we had something perhaps more valuable: understanding. And in the world of survival and healing, sometimes that's enough. The final page of my new journal wasn't an ending, but a beginning. To every survivor whose story was silenced, your voice matters. Your journey matters. And it's never too late to let your truth burn brighter than the fires meant to destroy it.